Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining. I'm Jennifer Castinson with Build Exact, and we're really excited that you're joining us here today to talk about pricing. And we have Randy Stanbury as our guest, but we're going to give it just a minute or two to let other people file into the room. And while we're waiting, if you don't mind, open up your chat and let us know where you're calling in from, and maybe tell us what you're doing. So if you're a remodeler, let us know. And if you're a builder, let us know. But tell us where you are and where in the world you are. If you're in Canada with Randy or if you're here in the US with me. Dallas, thanks for joining us, Abdul. West South Florida, soaking.
Yeah,
I like it.
smoking, nice.
Nashville, the booming town of Nashville. Thanks again for joining. I'm Jennifer Castinson with Build Exact, and we're going to get started here in just a minute. If you could just go to your chat, let us know where you're joining from. We'd love to hear from you. Plant City, Florida. Thank you, Stephanie. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, congratulations to anyone that's joining to take time to work on your business and not just in it. It's a big deal. It's not
really
easy to
good
do.
point, Randy. Vancouver, Washington, Richmond, Virginia. Well, thanks again, you guys. We're excited to get started. And I want to be respectful of everybody's time. General contractor from Harrison, Arkansas. That's great. I want to be respectful of your time. So we are going to get started. And I'm happy again to introduce you to Randy Stanbury. He's the head of 4-Level Coach and also has his own bookstore on Amazon that you can check out. A lot of great reading. And he's going to talk to us today about pricing. So without further ado, Randy, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Fantastic, Jennifer. Thank you. And again, I do respect your time. You know, taking time out to work on your business is extremely important, valuable. So congratulations for doing that. And I promise to deliver at a high level for you. And we will be moving through stuff fairly quickly because, as you can see, we've got a lot to cover with the 5 things you must know and the 7 common mistakes to avoid. And we're going to get into the only 4 ways to increase profit. Now, when we go through this stuff, we're going to be tying it together. Each one will lead to the next. It will all tie together. And you'll see a common thread and a common theme that we'll be tying together is thinking about your numbers as percentages and not just numbers, but what are the percentages and how do those percentages affect how we make decisions about how we price and how do we price for real profit if we're ever going to make any money to be able to grow and scale our business. Because if we don't get the numbers right first, nothing else matters. We'll talk about this throughout, no doubt. Nothing else matters until you get the numbers right. So to me, this is an absolute starting point that you've got to nail down and master. And we're going to simplify this as much as we can. So a little bit about 4-Level Coach. We'll just buzz through this fast. We work only with builders, remodelers. We don't work with any other business. We are builder and remodeler coach. Typically, we work with anywhere from $1 to $10 million, help businesses scale to 25 million plus. There is a way to do that. There is a system. Our 4-Level Coach system helps with success and how you get there. And then we have a farm system program that's very cool, works extremely well, gives you everything that you need. We call it our farm system because we're helping you get to the next level of cracking that first $1 million mark. So I'll, again, brief about my story. I think it's important that you know where I'm coming from, how I got here, and why just spending any time listening to me could be important. Right. So I started first business in 95. By 98, I knew enough to know I didn't know nearly enough. And that's when I went and first got my first business coach. We cracked our first $1 million. And by 2007, so 9 years later, it took to get what I refer to as ultimate freedom. Now, ultimate freedom is what I refer to as ultimate freedom of time and money. So I was no longer working in my business at all. I'd removed myself, put a president in place, vice president. The business is running and scaling, growing without me. I did that for the next 10 years while I went and set up the next business and the next business and grew and scaled those. And so when I sold my original core business in 2017, I thought, we did something special. I want to share what we learned, what I've done, and how I've done what I've done with others that want that too. So by 2019 is when we started 4-Level Coach, which is really my passion, is helping others grow and scale, but really make more than a living, make a fortune, and get some life and lifestyle in the process. And again, there's a 4-Level Coach system to doing that. So let's start, get into a couple of things. So Jennifer did mention we do have a few books out there. We have our 10 reasons why builders or modelers fail to grow. And that is, it just dials in there, those 10. Certainly pricing is one of them that we will get into deep today. We have our sales system book. I wrote a book a handful of years ago, The Small Business Freedom Formula. And we have our podcast here. So our podcast, if you're interested, is the Building Freedom Podcast. Check it out, and you can start kind of hearing more about what we talk about and why. So we have a number of partnerships. Again, I think it's just credibility, right? We only bring this up because we are not just out here. I'm not doing this because I read a book. We're doing this because this is what we do. This is what we do in multiple businesses across the country, plus our coaching business that we help others grow and scale. And not just grow and scale, but make the right money, the right percentages, as we mentioned before. It's going to come down to percentages as we talk through this. Guys, we always have bonuses at the end. So our complete pricing guide, this is an enormous pricing guide of content. It's all of the stuff that we're going to cover today. It's broken down into really nice, simplified pieces for you. And all of the tools, there's, links back to our website that to download some tools as well. So there's an enormous amount of content in this pricing guide. If you stick with us to the end, you'll get a link to that bonus. And then our pricing for profit tool. This tool just simplifies everything. I know Jennifer and Build Exact talk about removing the guesswork, right, from our pricing. We have to be able to do that. This tool will help you do that. So this stuff will be available for you at the end as we rip through this stuff. So let's get started. I would suggest grab a pen, paper, get something, a notepad to write on. We're going to rip through this quick. It'll be like a fire hose as we get going because I got to get through the content. This we refer to as our Sweet 16, as I mentioned. Again, all of this is in that bonus pricing guide that we're talking about. But it's the 5 things we need to know, the 7 common mistakes, the only 4 ways to increase profit. And we're going to tie together those 4 ways at the end. So what's going to be cool is you're going to see how when we tie the first reason, the second, the third, and the fourth, that we can start seeing how the numbers start to grow, and you'll see it in a real live actual, pricing event that says, when we do this, it takes us to here, we do this. And then when we combine them together, we get a 10x result. And we'll show you exactly how that works. So let's start with the 5 things. 5 things we must know. Number 1, if we don't know this one, we better know this one, is the difference between markup and margin, right? So if we have many of us throw out a 20 or 30% margin, which is often not close to enough, and we're going to show you why. But let's say a 30% margin, which is, let's go back. 30% margin here is actually the equivalent of a 23.08% margin. So a markup of 30% gets us a 23.08% margin. And all of the lists are here. Again, guys, this is in that bonus pricing guide. You don't need to necessarily write this down. Grab that bonus at the end. But you need to start understanding that when I put markups on, I'm not hitting my margins that I need because the markup is not giving me my margin. And this will come clearer as we move forward. When we look at a P&L, we have to understand how to read, and not just how to read it, but understand it. Understand that we got to be able to make decisions from our profit and loss statement. So this is just a simple breakdown of top level of how a profit and loss works, right? So we have our sales at the top line. We subtract our cost of goods sold. It's the actual cost of a project, which equals our gross profit, which we're left with. Now, again, remember percentages. So what's important here is this actual result of 141,000 is 22% of 641, right? So it's a 22% gross profit. Now, why is that important to know? I damn well better know that if I am going to make money, because if I look at my overhead expense, so what is my operating or overhead expense percentage, right? If my operating overhead expense percentage is 20% or 24%, let's say it's 24%, I can tell you right now, if you have a gross profit of 22, you're likely going to lose 2% on that job. So when we don't understand our overhead expense percentages and we don't understand our gross profit percentages, then how could we possibly price for real profit? So we have to start understanding these numbers. Again, guys, as I go through this, it'll all just start tying together. Some of the stuff will be clear right now. Some of the stuff won't be, whether you're been in business 10 years, 20 years, been doing this at 5, 10, 20 million dollars. There's going to be some gems that'll come out of this, I promise you. Right. So we end up with this net profit of 64K. That is a 10% net profit. Then it's very clear that if we have 22% gross, 12% overhead, then we're going to end up with a 10% net. So this is how that starts to tie together. We have to understand how to read that. Now, within that P&L, we have overhead expenses, but what often gets missed is the allocations are wrong in our P&Ls. So almost every single P&L I've ever looked at in any custom home builder remodeling business, there are misallocations in our profit and loss statements that will never give us the right data. So we're looking at and making decisions based on incorrect data, right? So this is just simple facts of overhead expense, right? So what are our monthly overhead expenses? Is number 3, we must know that. Now we also need to, as number 4, out of the 5 things we must need to know, is your break-even percentage. Again, I talk percentages. So what is the percentage? How do we get to a break-even percentage? It's really quite simple. We look at our monthly overhead expense divided by our monthly revenue. Now, I like to look at that over a longer period of time than just the 1 month. So let's look at it on an annual basis, or look at it on 3 months back and 3 months forward, right? Whatever numbers we're looking at, we have to take a snapshot in time and say, what is that number of expenses, overhead expenses, operating expenses divided by the actual revenue in the same time period, right? So in this case, we're operating with a 24.5% break even. Now, this is just a result. It's a fact. I cannot argue with the numbers. The numbers are factual. So if you don't know your break-even percentage, how could you possibly be pricing projects right now without knowing that number? And we'll show you why and how that's so important. Now, remember this, when I leave you this here, right? I leave you this 24.5%. This is going to come up in an example later, and you're going to see why that's so important. So the next thing is understanding how to calculate that gross profit, right? So simple calculation, simple formula. Again, every single one of these is in our cost guide, right? That you get in the end in your bonus. But look, if we take a $10,000, just a round figure, and we mark it up by 20%, it leaves us with this $12,000, right? This is, again, figuring out that gross profit or our margin and why it's so different than our markup, right? So we have a $2,000 markup on a $10,000 job at 20%. Right, then we take that 2,000, we divide it by the actual sale price, and we end up with 16.6%. So this formula is extremely important when we're thinking about pricing out jobs, understanding what margins we're going to be left with, if we're going to base it on a certain markup percentage. And that's often how the industry is working. We're putting a markup on our costs, and it leaves us with this margin, but we often aren't tying our margin back to our break-even percentage, and therefore we're wondering where the money is at the end of a job, right? So walking through this, we now understand that how to calculate this out, what our gross profit actually is. And when we said this, we said this before, right? That 30% is actually the equivalent of 23 or 23.08%, which is a margin or a gross profit that we're left with in our P&L. And so if we look at our profit and loss, it's extremely important that we understand profit and loss, break even, how to calculate these numbers, the difference between markup and margin. If I know these 5 things, I can start moving forward to avoid the 7 common pricing mistakes, which we're going to get to next. But let's start with a common pricing practice, right? So this is an average basement job, right? Made up numbers here, but they're very, very similar to most projects that we look at on any daily basis with any client, right? If you're a remodeler, this is probably not far off, right? But we just have some round figures to work with, right? So materials, 40K in materials. We got labor at 45. Remember, these are all our direct related costs, right? Subtrades, 12.5. We've got, we rented a tool or two on this project, right? So we ended up with another $2,500 directly related to that project. Total cost of 100K. Now, I'm going to show you why. In this instant, I can tell you that this company is going to actually lose $1,850 based on the fact of understanding what their break even is. So a 30% markup on 100K leaves us with $30,000 or a sale price to our client of 130. Now, you remember that break even number I had suggested, right? We said keep that in mind. That was 24.5%. So for that client that's operating at a 24.5% break even, I tell you what, they are going to lose $1,850 if they do this job. Now, we often say to, clients, especially that are new with us, and say, hey, if you're pricing projects like this and not knowing your numbers, you'd be better off right now to write that client a check for $1,000 and suggest that you're not going to price this project because it'll save you money, right? Which is completely crazy. You would save money if you just wrote a check for $1,000 and walked away from the job, right? Because why is that, right? Well, the 24.5% margin or break even is the equivalent of a cost of $31,850 for this project at $100,000. So it's going to cost you $31,850 in overhead to run this project if you're operating right now at 24.5%. Guys, I know this, it might seem complicated and maybe feel like we're jumping around, but remember when I said the facts are facts, results are results. We cannot argue with the numbers. So if we're operating currently at 24.5, we cannot be charging 30% and ever make any money, right? So we have to know where we're at, how are we currently operating, and how are we ever going to get the price point to where it needs to be if we're going to make some money, right? That's critical. So once we know that, that's our first 5 things we have to understand. And if we bring that together, we can move forward into now the 7 common mistakes to avoid. Now, you'll start seeing by knowing some of those things, you automatically start avoiding some of these mistakes, right? Which is number 1, that we're pricing, with a markup without knowing our overhead. Now, our overhead is basically the equivalent of a break even, right? It's that overhead dollar amount, which is divided by the actual revenue, right? So that gives us a number. If we don't know our overheads, we don't know our operating percentage, how could we possibly be using a markup? So please, guys, this is where we ask you to slow down to speed up. Please do not quote more jobs tomorrow. Do not rush out and do more work and more estimates without getting a handle on your overhead and your break-even percentage. It's critical. So mistake number 1, avoid this at all costs. Do not move forward until we know this. Number 2, already touched on this a little bit, that we're misallocating. When we are misallocating our expenses in our P&L, so we're putting some of the wrong cogs in the overheads, or the overhead should be in the cogs, right? So and it usually comes down to labor and people and, where we're putting things that show up on our P&L. Because if they don't show up properly, our break even is going to show up as incorrect. And we're going to be making decisions on our price point, and it's all going to be for naught because we have the wrong data. So the mistake that we must avoid is not misallocating. We have to make sure we have them in the right places, right? So, which leads to this, right? Far too often we see project management, the cost of project management being allocated in our overhead expenses. Now, why is that so important? Because we need to be costing for the cost of a project manager if we're ever going to get our numbers right and understand the true cost of a project. Because look, the project manager on your team, site super that works directly on a project, is a direct cost to that project, which it has to be allocated to the cost of goods of that project if we're ever going to get our pricing right and understand how we think about the math we do when we estimate a job, we got to have project management in there. Typically, that is shown as an overhead, and what ends up happening, it comes out of our gross profit, which is way too late because the client never paid for it. Right? So they have to pay for project management directly. You have to get your gross profit to a number that can pay your break-even percentage. Hopefully this is starting to come together. And if you have questions, remember, we're going to hold questions to the end, but write them down, note them, bring them back later. If any of this is, well, number 4 here, confusing, right? If it's confusing, make sure you ask at the end. But we're confusing markup with gross profit, right? We're confusing the percentages, and therefore we're using a markup and not a margin, which is one of the things that we must know, right? We know that now. But guys, we cannot confuse the percentage and the dollar values and what's required in order to make you money. So number 4, we got to avoid the mistake of confusing markup with gross profit and those percentages. Now, number 5 of the mistakes we make, this is a big one, right? If we have self-performing teams, we have our own labor on projects, we are typically underestimating the true cost of that labor. Now, often I ask is a new client that rolls in, and you'll see at the end, we have a 10-point diagnostic of all of the areas that we're looking for that we know that are bleeding cash in a typical builder remodeler business, right? So what we're going to be asking is this one for sure. If you have labor, what is the actual cost of that labor? Now I'll say, well, what do you pay them? Let's say they say I'll pay them $30 an hour. Okay, what is their true cost? And they look at deer in headlights and say, I just told you this $30 an hour. Well, it's not just $30 an hour because we have what we call labor burden. Now, we have taxes on that. There's a percentage of tax, a dollar value that gets attached. Typically, you're looking at anywhere from another $1.50 to $2 an hour just on tax that's coming out of your pocket as a business owner. Typically, if they don't work, yes, they work an 8-hour workday, but we don't get 8 hours of productivity. How do we cover when we have management meetings or, coffee and whatever, lunchtime, downtimes? We typically work around 6 hours a day. This is why I say 6 billable hours that we have out of a day. Well, let's look at 6 billable hours. That bumps our rate up from 30 to 31.50 to 42. And then we have stat holidays, vacations. We have this, paid time off, right? PTO. So any of the paid time off also starts adding up to our dollars. So when it gets right down to it, we can say that there is at least a 1.5 multiple on whatever we pay them, which is actually a more accurate true cost. Now, I use that loosely because we have to have a starting point. You're best to get into your numbers, dig into your business, and see what the actual true cost is. Now, what we're not talking about here is any workman's compensation, right? So what are those fees? What is that costing you? That's a direct cost to this employee. So this number bumps up and bumps up on labor burden. Now, if we don't understand that labor burden and we think we can charge $50 an hour, and it's like, geez, I should be making pretty decent money. I pay 30, I charge 50, it should be okay. Well, typically, at $50, you might be making a couple bucks an hour, but you're probably not making much there, right? So it needs to be substantially more than $50 an hour on a $30 person, right? So we have to start understanding labor burden. Please do not make that mistake. At least you've heard this now. Dig into your own labor burdens, understand what that formula is. Again, as part of the bonus at the end, you'll get the formulas of how to figure that out. Not comparing estimates to actuals. Guys, this one drives me absolutely crazy. We work our ass off in the field. We've quoted jobs, we've estimated these jobs, we then go to work, we get the jobs done. If we're using our software properly, I promise you, Build Exact, you would be able to do job costing if you used it properly. But often we're too busy to use it properly. So again, we're not slowing down to speed up. We're just trying to get the next thing done, right? Going 100 miles an hour to the next thing. Instead of saying, okay, how did we actually do? We just wrapped up a project. We should be job costing every project. And I promise you, when you start job costing every project and you know what the true costs, you can start improving your estimates and getting a much better estimated number that you're not missing dollars on. You can get the actuals up to the right number, because even if you get your percentages right on the markup and margin and you got that right, but you're underestimating the actual cost, and you do that over and over, you're just bleeding cash. And what you're going to see as we move forward is you got cash blown out the windows, you got holes in your boat, you're bailing water constantly, which is what keeps us on the hamster wheel, right? So we've got, the only way to get off the hamster wheel is to start figuring out these things, avoid these mistakes, understand those first 5 things, right? It really is about slowing down to speed up, as opposed to just going 100 miles an hour at everything and never getting it right along the way. So this is critical, critical, critical. So number 6, we've got to start doing that. Now, number 7, now this happens a lot in small business, right? Here we've got, Joe's Reno, and it's a one-man show, 2, 3 people, maybe we got 4 or 5, but we have this fairly small business, right? Now, this fairly small business relies on and operates with very low overhead. And here's what I ask all the time. When a business says, hey, I've got next to no overhead, so it's good, I don't have to charge for it. I can, I should be able to make more money because I don't have much overhead, right? So I can be more competitive. I can price lower, right? I can get these jobs and underbid people because I don't have much for overhead. But I promise you this, as long as you keep operating with a low overhead, that is what you will always be able to afford, low overhead, right? If you cannot increase your price point, right? Take the low overhead and make more money with it, but operate from an estimate. Let's estimate from a standpoint of the overhead that you would require to grow and scale your business. Let's put those numbers in as if they exist. That way, you'll be able to afford them. When people say I can't add people, I can't afford people, and then if we don't get it right and we can't afford people, maybe we can afford C-level players instead of A, they will kill us. The only way to get to the next level is to be able to afford good talent, good people that are experienced, that know what they're doing, that can actually remove you from the day-to-day to get you to the next level. I promise you, in 2007, when I was removed fully from my business, it was because I had a team of A players. It was because we were charging appropriately, making the right money, freeing me from the operation, because the A players were following systems to get it done, right? So you'll never be able to build and grow and scale teams if we don't actually include overhead, increased overhead. Don't operate from this false overhead without adding it into your estimates, or you'll never be able to afford anything but low overhead. Hope that makes sense. I want to move into our next piece here, right? This is where really all of the magic happens in these numbers, right? It's the 4 ways to increase net profit. Now, remember, we got to go back on those 5 things we now know, and the 7 mistakes that I'm going to avoid moving forward. If I can do that, and then I understand and I start tying all that together with the 4 ways to increase profit, you will be able to take your business to the next level finally, right? Now, you might be in your business for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10, 20 years, right? If you haven't been able to really put enough money away or build your bank to be able to sustain real growth and add real people that can be paid really well for what they do, you will be stuck on a hamster wheel for a very long time. So this is the critical next piece. So what's very cool here is we're going to walk through an exercise of exact numbers and how they work together, and you'll see what the actual possibilities are when you start doing this, which we refer to, right? These 4X, there's 4 ways to increase this net profit, right? But these 4 ways will get you a 10X result. And I'm going to prove that to you as we walk through each one of them. So hold me to it to prove it to you that this 10X result is possible when I understand and leverage these 4 ways to increase net profit. Now, what's critical here, right? We're going to walk through an actual, well, this is the numbers, right, of that basement job where we said it's a $100,000 job cost. That's what the job was going to cost us. We're going to put a markup of $30,000, which was a 30% markup on the 100K. Well, that's going to give us a sale price to our client of $130,000. And that is the equivalent of a 23.08% gross profit, right? It's exactly the numbers that we had before. Now, in this case, we're going to use a break even of 20%. So imagine if you're operating your business with our overhead expense that is the equivalent currently right now of 20% break even. Now, if that's the case, I promise you the numbers do not lie. What I love about math and love about the numbers, when you understand them, they do not lie. They tell exactly the truth about what's going on in your business, and everything going forward. Every decision you make should be based on the facts of the numbers, right? So net profit, we're going to be left with, if we have 23.08 gross profit with a break even of 20, it's going to leave us with 3.08%. It's just the difference between gross profit and our break even. That's why I started with our profit and loss and really understanding how to read that, right? So our profit and loss in this case would say we are going to have a net profit of 3.08%. That's $4,004. So call it $4,000, right? So on this $100,000 job, we're going to have a net profit of $4,000. Now, let's start adding in the 4 ways to increase profit. Number 1 is increase price. Now, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out, hey, if I increase price, I'm going to make more money. But bear with me as to why we're going to make more money. Not just the fact that it's increased the price. See what it affects along the way, and see when we sync these 4 together, what it starts doing to the outcome of your business, and why this is not just about pricing, everyone. This is about being an entrepreneur. This is about getting financial literacy in your business so that you can make better decisions, run your business from a different standpoint, not from the standpoint of being a builder in the field, being a business owner that's strategically making decisions to make more money and grow your business, right? So this is critical stuff that you need to know. Number 1, increase price, right? So same job cost, $100,000, did not change. What we did, though, was increase the price. So in order to increase price, we increased the markup, right? So now we got a 40% markup, or we increased markup by $40,000. We now have a sale price of $140 instead of $130, right? So what did it do to the numbers? This is what's important. What it did to the numbers is bring us to 28.57% gross profit. Remember, our break even, we're operating our business right now at 20%. So what did it do to our net profit? It took our net profit from that 3.08% to 8.57. Now you're starting to get where you need to be on the net profit line, right? 8.57. Now we're going to make $11,000, or call it $12,000 on this $100,000 job cost, right? We're going to actually make 12 grand here. And I know that because I know my break even. I know my gross profit I'll be left with, right? So we went from our net profit of 4 grand to 12 grand. And that's the starting point. We went from 4 to 12, right? That's number 1, increase price. Now, if we can do number 1 and simultaneously increase our monthly or annual revenue, what is the hell is that going to do? Why is that so important? If we can increase monthly and annual revenue without touching our overhead expenses stay the same, but we increase our monthly run of revenue. What it does, we need to create a business that generates more work at higher price points with a team that can fulfill on the increased volume. Now, let me read that again, because that is a critical statement. So you running your business as a true entrepreneur and understanding how to do that, you need to be able to create a business that generates more work at higher price points with a team that can fulfill on the increased volume, right? That is the magic of being an owner that's, intelligently and strategically developing your business. Now, remember, what does it do to break even? If I increase monthly and annual revenue, what it's going to do, monthly overhead stay the same, right? Here, this number here, it would stay the same. But what it's going to do if we increase revenue over here, we're going to divide that by that increased revenue, and it's going to decrease my break even. So it's going to take that break even point down. So I increase price, I take break even down, I'm going to have a bigger gap to make more money with, right? So this is where the magic comes in. So let's run these numbers now. Remember, we kept the original increased price point of number one. We added number two, and we have this increase of monthly and annual revenue. Same job cost, same new markup, which is $140,000, same gross profit, 28.57%. But what did it do when we increased monthly annual revenue? It brought down my break even. So this is the game we need to play. Remember I said understanding percentages is going to be the key to everything we talk about today, right? So decreasing that break-even point from 20 to 15 just gave us another 5% because we're intelligently, strategically taking our business to the next level, right? This is everything that four-level coach is doing. Every single thing we touch is to work on these 4 ways to increase this profit. Because if you don't get this money right, guys, you cannot build the teams you need to grow and scale. So, or get any freedom, right? Freedom only comes from the right teams doing the right things consistently the way you want it done, right? So net profit in this case, right? So net profit went from that 8.57 now up to 13.57. And now we have a total of call it $19,000 here of net profit. Now, I promise you, if you are a remodeler, this is the area that you should be playing in, right? 13.57. In fact, if you're a remodeler doing a $100,000 project or cost of a project here, 140K job, we should be able to hit 15% margins, right? So if we're anywhere under that, there's something not right with the way our business runs and operates. There's money on the table. We're bleeding cash somewhere along the way. We've got to get to these numbers, 15 to 20% as a remodeler, call it 8 to 12% as a custom home builder, right? So think about those numbers as we walk through this. This is a remodeler example, right? So 13.57, we got 19. So we went from 4,000 to 12,000 here to 19,000. So we literally went from that 4,000 to 19,000 by just focusing on the 2 ways, right? The 2 ways to increase net profit. As again, when we talk about these 4 ways, we'll give you a 10x result. We're heading in that direction right now. Now, here is number 3, third way to increase net profit, right? Of course, now, as a business owner, what's the next thing I should be able to do, right? If I can decrease my monthly costs or my annual overhead costs of running this business, if I can get more effective, more efficient, right? So this line here, become more and more effective and efficient with internal processes. Now it's about systems. Now we're talking processes, systems that get you more effective, get things done, productivity goes up. We systematize the business, right? And that decreases our overhead costs, right? So over time, we get our overhead costs to come down. Why does this help us? What's it going to do to the break even? It brings our break even down even further, right? So if we can do number 3, what we said over here is increase monthly and annual revenue. We increase revenue. While we are now doing number 3, we're decreasing our monthly expenses. We now take that decreased monthly expense, divide it by that increased monthly revenue, and I promise you, this is how it works. When you are running your business strategically with just optimal piece in here and why we make decisions based on numbers, holy shit, this is the game changer. Everything changes, right? So again, let's run through what did this actually do to the numbers, right? Same job cost, same new price point, same gross profit. Break even now went from 20 down to 15 down to 10. Now, I promise you may look at these numbers and say, well, that seems nuts to go from 20 down to 10%. It is not nuts. It's exactly what happens. It's exactly what you have to be doing in your business to get to the point where you are running it effectively, efficiently as a top tier level business owner, entrepreneur, right? This is possible. These are the numbers we have to get to. In fact, these are the numbers that get you to the 15 to 20% mark. And I'm going to show you that. So net profit now is 18.57, right? The same price point job, the same cost of a job, right? We took it that 28% is giving us now 18.5 because we brought down our actual break even. Your break even, I promise you, is everything. Your ability to grow and scale your business is everything to do with your ability to take that break even down from where it currently is, which is probably 20+%, right? Down to a much more workable number of 10 points, right? Especially if you are a remodeler. Now, builders, if you're a custom builder and you start increasing revenue and you're doing some bigger numbers, you can get that number down to 3 points. You'll get that number down to 2 or 3% break even. And this is why, and why you may be struggling at this point, because your break even is currently 12 and you just can't make more than a few points on the bottom line net profit of your business. But it's all sitting on the table. Trust me, it needs to be peeled out and done properly. So net profit, right? We now have 26K. And this is possible to go from 4,000 to 12 to 19 here, up to $26,000. This is the game we need to be playing, and this is where our numbers need to be, right? Now we're playing in that 15 to 20% range, which is where you need to be. If you can get to that point, you're running your business extremely well. And I promise you, freedom is now not far away because you can start affording the right people doing the right things, right? This is how this works. This is what I figured out in 2007, why I got myself removed from my business, because all of this started to make sense to me, right? Critical pieces. Now, the last of the four, right? Number 4, we actually decrease the cost of the job. Now, as we start getting better at our business, we start buying better, right? Now, I don't talk about buying better and then passing that buying power and better buying on to our client. Let's buy better and keep our estimating at the line of where we could have bought it at, right? But now we're starting to buy better, so we're decreasing the actual cost of a job. Now, of course, if you're doing cost plus, this does not apply on number 4 because, of course, our plus on our cost plus has to do everything with our cost of a job. Now, I'm not suggesting don't deploy this and actually work better cost of jobs, because you're going to get yourself more competitive with your client. You need to focus on number 4. It's just not going to have a bigger effect on your bottom line than a fixed price builder or a fixed price remodeler, right? So when you start decreasing the actual cost of a job, now here's the other thing, right? How many times do we underestimate the cost of a job, and that cost of the job goes up because of scope creep? Because we didn't focus on it. We didn't know what was fully in the scope of that work. We missed things along the way because we're running too fast and we didn't estimate properly. And then we didn't do our job costing at the end. So our estimate to actuals were off. So we continue to price jobs at the wrong cost of that job. And so it's killing us, right? So this is absolutely critical last point, right? So with a well-oiled machine, a business that commands better buying power, and a one ecosystem job site that reduces the actual cost of our job, because that ecosystem job site will reduce the cost of a job. When we reduce costs of a job, then we do those other 3: increase price, do more monthly revenue, decrease our overhead expenses. Then we decrease our cost of our job, but we price it at the market value of that job. Oh my God, the magic of that is outstanding, right? So now we're getting into that optimal range of 20.71%. Now, up here, right, the cost of the job decreased. Now, we estimated the job at 100,000, right? We charged 140,000. What did it do? It gave us actually $3,000 more markup. So our markup percentage grew because we were able to pay less for the work that we were going to do. We estimated it at 100, but during the job, the actual work in the field, the actual buying power grabbed us and saved us another $3,000. So our price point didn't change, but what did it do to our gross profit? Took our gross profit to 30.71%. That gives us 20.71%, almost $29,000 here. So we went from $4,000 on the bottom end. This is where a lot of us live, is at that $4,000 range, and why we can work our ass off every single day as hard as we want. It's not about working harder, it's about working smarter. It's working on your business and not in it, all the cliches, right? But it's the truth. You can work your ass off at 4,000, or you can start doing this, and this takes something to get done. This is what we do in our programs. This is all we are focused on, is to get you from that 4,000 to the 29 at the top end and the pinnacle, so you can start really making some real money. You'll make a fortune and not a living here, right? This is how you get to 20+%. Now, I told you before, right, that I'm going to show you how we go from that 4X to the 10X result. Now, you'll see that the 10X result, it's like, well, hold on, Randy, we went from $4,000 to $29,000, right? Well, that's not a 10X result, but here's where the 10X result is. When you start multiplying this and you get better and better at closing these deals, higher price points, you are going to create a machine that will get you an absolute 10X result on those numbers, because you start multiplying this. It becomes exponential, right? So you hit the knee of the curve and you take off. This is when you start getting a 10X result, by deploying these 4 reasons, understanding the 5 things I must know, and the 7 common mistakes I need to avoid. When I deploy these 4, the game changes. Now, here's what we talked about earlier, guys, right? That if you don't slow down to speed up, I promise you, you got cash blowing out the window. So this image here is just to kind of give you an idea, a little bit of a metaphor about when you're going 100 miles an hour to the next job in your truck, getting to that estimate, dealing with that issue, client concern, right? Job site concerns, sub-trade concerns, labor not showing up, labor making mistakes, right? Didn't order early enough, so we've got problems on the site, delays. All of this stuff is costing us money. So look, it's imagine putting all the cash in the back seat of your truck, and you're going 100 miles an hour to all of these things that are in your way, pulling you in 100 directions every day. It's like having the windows rolled down in the back seat and the cash is just blowing out. So guys, what I urge you to do is stop the cash from blowing out. Let's slow down and roll up the windows, right? Let's get those windows up. Then let's make some real money. Then let's speed up when we get the machine working right. Because essentially it's this. You're in the boat, you got holes in the boat, you're bailing every day. And as we're bailing, we're working our ass off, bailing water, trying to get across the ocean to our goals, right? But we're constantly bailing water, and all that we got is problems along the way. So we feel very stuck on this hamster wheel. And nothing is going to change until we can get freed up from that. Now, the question, 3 questions, right? Do you have holes in your boat? Are you stuck in the hamster wheel, and do you want to stop the bleeding and to get off that hamster wheel? And, you know, I know everyone has holes in their boat. Most of us feel stuck. And I only know this because we work with people every single day that we hear this every single day, right? So the fact is, our program, we have what we call our 4-week cash builder. It's the first 4 weeks with us. It is our 10-point diagnostic to stop this so that we can get into your business. We diagnose the 10 areas that we know are bleeding cash, where you have holes, like estimates, right? So spend the first 4 weeks with us getting into the guts of your world, so this is your slowing down to speed up, right? This is where you can find the holes, and then you create a game plan in order to fix that. And what you're left with is what we'll call our, we get you access to during these 30 days as well. It's not just us diagnosing your business, working with you week to week with a small group of other builders around the country that are also going through the same stuff. Likely some people on here, if you guys, a handful want to do this, but we also give you all of the content and tools that you need. So like our financial mastery, these are all short videos on understanding all of these concepts and tools that we're talking about, including cash flow and your 12 critical numbers, right? So every one of these are, short videos here. Now, under this, 20-minute video on your 12 critical numbers, right? But underneath each video is a link to some tool, some spreadsheet to make your life easy. I cannot just teach you stuff without giving you the tools that'll make your life easy in the process, right? You don't have to recreate the wheel, it's created for you. You want to get to these results, this is how you do it much quicker. So we have content around pricing, around how to use your time, leverage your time, building your team, getting the right people on, creating the systems you need. All of those tools are available. So here's the thing. What I want to talk about, this 10-point diagnostic, we will guarantee if you're doing over $1 million in sales, we guarantee we'll find 50K. We'll find 50K that's bleeding in your business right now, or 100% money back because, well, guys, I'm not going to sell you on anything because if we can't find that, then I'm going to give your money back. But here's why we know that that 50K exists, because we do this constantly. We do that. This is what we do. Like Paul, $177,000 in 17 days. So literally on the 17th day, I was like, holy shit, there's where the problems are. You know, Drew was 329. Guys, you'll see these numbers are big. Well, as your business grows, as you're doing, you know, if you're doing 5-6 million, you're going to have bigger numbers because you've got a bigger bleed. The smaller your business, the smaller the bleed. But that's why we promise that is there. The guarantee is that we'll find the 50K. But there's an ongoing list. We're going through this right now with 3 other builders. All of them are 100K plus, easy, that we found within the first 15 days, right? So guys, the track record's there. We throw this up just so that you have some tangible, actual, you know, result from one of our reviews where, you know, we went through. Now, this was Dan going through, as he says, my bad. It says here, during the onboarding, that Randy brought some things to our attention on how we should be charging to achieve our goal, which showed us he was missing $30,000 a month that they were missing in managing their projects. There's project management fees on several different projects. And the fact was they were missing 30K. After that onboarding, in the first 30 days, they went and started charging these dollars. This is the equivalent they got back. Now, when we think we can't hire people, right, because they can't afford it, right? So this first line, he said, they didn't know if they could afford to hire a project manager. Well, you can't afford it because they weren't charging properly for it. So when you find 30K a month, yeah, you can afford a project manager and make yourself a hell of a lot more money. This is why we're stuck. So guys, please take advantage. Please take advantage of the fact that if you're a builder or modeler, we can do the same for you. We guarantee we can. So I urge you to take advantage of this and just schedule a call. Schedule a business assessment so we can help you go through this and then create a real game plan for you to execute on buttoning up those holes in the boat, rolling up those windows so you keep the cash in, and then start building a real business that's actually scalable. Under the strategic byproduct that comes out of it, guys, is your mindset shift changes. You become more of a business owner and entrepreneur, right? So if you're struggling to understand what do I do with my time, when Randy, when you say work on the business and not in it, what would I be doing, right? So we're going to share all that. All the content and tools we're giving you is all of those things to work on it and not in it, right? So take advantage of this, guys. Again, I got nothing to sell you on. If we cannot help you with an enormous amount of money that's bleeding in your business, $50,000 to $100,000, I end up giving your money back. We can't find that minimum 50, right? So there is a massive return, like ridiculous return on your investment for this. So please take advantage of it. We should have a link. Katie likely put a link in chat for you here to book that assessment. You can also use this QR code to book it as well. And we have our bonuses. So Katie, you can also please throw bonuses in chat as well. Have our link there for that. Make sure you get the complete that pricing guide and our pricing for profit tool that I promised you as well. Oh, it should note that tool does include a short video on how to use it, guys. So that's also there for you. So grab those, and I hope to see you on. Look, there's a lot of people on the call, so the sooner you book that, the better to grab a time slot. I will say this: if you don't find a time slot, in our calendar booking, then just go to this email here, or if you're watching it on demand, just go to info here at 4Level Coach and just request to book a call. Just say I couldn't find a time that worked for you. We'll make sure we make it work for you. And we get into some Q&A. Hope this was helpful.
Randy, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. And I know that there's one question that's already in the chat, which is from Stephen
Awesome.
Murphy, and he asked, why doesn't the $10,000 drop right to the next profit?
Can you ask that again? Make sure I understood that.
Yeah, so it's been 20 minutes since that you probably were presenting this, but he said, why doesn't the $10,000 drop right to the net profit?
Why does the $10,000 drop right to the net profit? Oh, okay. Let me go back. I want to make sure we answer this properly for him. So let me go back here. I'm thinking that it was probably as we increase price here, right? This right here. So this is, am I right, Stephen? If you throw in chat, just give me a thumbs up or a check mark or something. I'm assuming you're talking about this here because we increased price by $10,000, right? So why does that not go directly to the bottom line? Because remember markup versus margin. We increased it by a markup of $40,000, but we don't get that out in a gross profit when we go through how to calculate gross profit, the difference between markup and margin. So the margin we got out increased that margin by, let's go back here. We had a 23.08% gross profit. What did it do? It increased it to 28.57, right? So we don't get a full 10% markup. We get a smaller margin out, right? So it's about margin that we come out. We do not get that full 10,000 drop bottom line. That's knowing the difference between markup and margin. I'm assuming that's what he's referring to.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And Randy, I think we're kind of out of time. I know that you left your contact information for everybody to follow up with you. And I think Randy also said during this that, as you're using Build Exact, or if you're not using Build Exact, there's a very, very, it's a cool tool to track costing the whole entire time you're doing your project. And you can also be linked into your suppliers, and you're getting true costs from them, and then you can view your change orders there.
That's what I love about Build Exact.
Yeah,
there's a lot. That's game changer. That's all that stuff at the end, guys, that like when you're tied into that pricing, you and job costing, oh my God, massive. Leverage the software, leverage the tools.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. That's awesome. And one more thing, I'm going to launch a quick poll that will help Randy and I deliver to you guys better. But basically, looking at what time and day works best for you guys in the future to do webinars. So we have lots of people who sign up for the webinars and not lots of people who show up for them. So and sometimes we don't have a lot that register for them. So we want to just make sure that we're getting you guys during the day and the time that works best. So thanks again for joining us, everybody. Really appreciate your time and your attention. And as Randy said, focusing on improving your businesses is a big job. And so you guys are committed to that. And we appreciate that for you guys, and we want to be here to support you to do that. So please call on us anytime, and thank you again. And Randy, huge thanks. This is fantastic content. I learned a lot today too.
Amazing. Thanks, Jennifer, and thank you everyone for hanging with us.
Yes, thank you so much.